Well, I promised the last gathering that medical device sterilization was a hot topic, but it looks like we have a smaller room here. So, I really encourage everybody to kind of, if you could, just move up a little bit, consolidate a little bit. That would be great, because we might as well, make this more of a discussion in here. I'm Chris Newmarker. I'm executive editor of MassDevice and Medical Design and Outsourcing. Medical device sterilization may not seem like the most exciting subject, but it's actually serious business in our industry. Simply put, people can die when devices aren't sterilized properly, and the space, faces actually some major challenges. For example, ethylene oxide is one of the most common methods of sterilizing finished medical devices. But plants are closing across the country as companies faced increased EPA regulation. Hospital-acquired infections and deadly superbug outbreaks are becoming increasingly common. And there's the transformation of medical device regulation that we're seeing in Europe with the upcoming EU MDR. But here today we have experts who can help provide us insights into each of these challenges. Denny Christensen, he owns an ETO sterilization facility right in this neighborhood here in San Jose. He's been involved in medical device sterilization since the late 1960s. Jian Zhang, he's the founder and CEO of a stealth model startup that's working on a single-use endoscope. Logesh Chokkalingam is a group project manager at HCL Technologies, and he's an expert on EU MDR. And Erin Manning is VP of Marketing at Verrix. Verax is preparing to launch what the company describes as novel sterilization assurance technology. But I'd say let's just launch right into this. Dennis, you're very active in the ETO sterilization space. kind of just explain to people kind of the situation right now for ETO sterilization.
Is this on? Okay.
We're on, all right.
Yeah. Well, there's been some release of ethylene oxide to the environment that's caused a lot of political concerns. 2 weeks ago, I was at the FDA meeting in Maryland talking about the release and what alternatives do we have to ethylene oxide sterilization. Some people think we should convert to radiation sterilization. The radiation sterilization people were there. They have no capacity available. The people that do have capacity might be X-ray and electron beam, and everybody that's in cobalt is looking to go to there. So it's not an easy changeover. It's not a quick changeover. There's some alternative methods of sterilization that are coming out. I've worked with most of them. The Noxalizer, the Revox, the Vipro. They're still not ready for prime time. A lot of these sterilization processes, you can't put paper or cardboard in. So how do you sterilize it when you're doing 30 pallets a day of your product? Conclusion of the FDA meeting was pretty much that for the next 10 years, we have to determine how to stay with ethylene oxide sterilization, but make it better and safer. And I think that's the way we're going to be going in the future. I'm actually on an FDA panel right now trying to figure out how to improve, minimize the use of ethylene oxide, reduce EO concentration, and reduce EO product residuals.
I know just last week, EPA was requesting comment on, they were talking about available control technologies for, reducing the emissions. They were talking about developments in practices, measurement, monitoring processes. Do you think that's going to help out and, hopefully allay, whether or not, the people who live around the plants are really basing their concerns on science. It's become a political issue. Do you think this is going to allay some of the concerns?
The politics has been driving it more than the reality of science. Yeah. My facility here in San Jose, I'm allowed to exhaust 0.95 pounds per year. Doesn't matter how many sterilizers I have, that's my limit. If you calculate that, it comes out to 2 grams a day. I emit next to nothing in terms of ethylene oxide. The problems they had was like back in Willowbrook, where they emitted thousands of pounds of EO residuals into the environment in a residential neighborhood. And unfortunately for them, the facility was right next door to the mayor of the village. Yeah. So when you look
I also recall, unfortunately, one of their former owners was the governor running for re-election in Illinois too. So that didn't help.
It became politicized very quickly. And then right after that, a facility up in Grand Rapids, Michigan closed. They were concerned about the long-term effects, and because of their location, they shut down. Becton Dickinson had a problem in Covington, Georgia. They released like 10,000 pounds. And here again, it's not in the best neighborhood that they're releasing it. Doesn't matter what the neighborhood is, but that was a bad neighborhood. The technology exists, and most companies have it these days, to control EO emissions to remove 99.9+% of the ethylene oxide. There should be almost no emissions coming out of a well-designed modern facility.
Got it. So that's kind of the thing. So kind of what I'm hearing you saying is that we don't necessarily need to move to different sterilization technologies. We just got to be, running the plants that we have better
Well, a lot of the facilities need upgrading. They need the latest emission control equipment. There's a company called Leslie out of Denmark that, they capture all your ethylene oxide and hardly anything ever leaves the facility.
So, I'm not sure, how many people around here are, running companies or designing, devices where you're going to be looking at sterilization methods? I mean, anybody here doing that? I guess, if you're like, okay, we're making a medical device, we're going to be, mass producing this to some degree, we're going to need to use ETO sterilization because that's kind of the gold standard to make sure this thing doesn't have bugs on it, basically. What kind of questions should they be asking an ETO sterilizer to make sure that they aren't going to be like seeing their sterilizer on the evening news and having problems?
Any new product you're developing, one of the first questions you should be asking yourself is, how am I going to sterilize this? Because your choice of materials, your choice of packaging, all that is critical for your end product when you go to sterilize it. Almost all medical products these days are packaged in Tyvek poly pouches or PETG trays with Tyvek lids. They can go either method. It's the materials inside that you build your product with that controls your method of sterilization. Ethylene oxide, since it's been around for 100 years, has a lot more materials that are compatible with the sterilization process than radiation, electron beam.
Right. A lot of devices, especially if they're made of polymers, the radiation can damage it. The nice thing about ethylene oxide, I've been to manufacturers where you just put this in pallets and Tyvek and get it in, and
when you're done sterilizing it, the effects of sterilization are over. With radiation, you've got to be careful because you can get brittleness and stuff that develops over time depending upon the sterilization dose you're using.
That's kind of really why. That's kind of a question I've had, and I've heard other people have, is how did ETO become such a common sterilization method? But it just sounds like, as far as if you're sterilizing a lot of stuff and you want to do it efficiently, that it's kind of the standard right now.
Well, I started sterilization in 1967. That was the only choice we had.
Wow.
It wasn't until the early 80s that radiation actually opened the first facility in Parsippany, New Jersey.
Wow.
So, there's been some more growth.
It was really the only choice at one point.
But for many years, it was the only choice. So that's why all the materials, all the packaging, that's how it evolved to be the number one method of sterilization. So, like I say, it wasn't until the mid-'80s we even had an alternative.
How tough is it going to be for the major device companies to because it sounds like the standards are going up, and whether, EPA's making noise that they're going to do something. Already individual states are doing more. Are they gonna? Is this just basically like a cost they're going to have to swallow to to move forward?
There was one company, one of the Fortune 500 companies at the FDA meeting, and they said they made a commitment like 10 years ago to try and convert as many products as possible from ethylene oxide to radiation. And in 8 years, they were able to convert 20% of their product line.
Okay.
Because of materials and compatibility methods, that type of thing.
So it can be possible. I also understand too, I've heard to move to a new sterilization method can be, it's not an easy thing. It's not to be just like, oh, we're going to just move to a new sterilization method or devices. Let's do it. This is actually difficult. You need to revalidate and.
Okay, well, I'm on the committee that writes all the rules for sterilization. The FDA has 3 classifications per product. They have what we call Class A sterilization. That's steam, that's ethylene oxide, and that's radiation. Those are traditional methods, easy to get validated, easy to get through the FDA, easy to get ISO approval from. Class B is what we call non-traditional but emerging technologies. Right now, that would be a hydrogen peroxide, a little bit of EO in a bag. There's a concept there. And then the Class C is the non-traditional. That's the peracetic acid, the nitrogen dioxide, chlorine dioxide, but none of these are really fully approved methods, and the sterilizers aren't big enough to handle the volume of products that are being produced.
Wow.
Like, if you gave them an order tomorrow and said, I'm going to do 30 pallets, they couldn't build you a sterilizer.
That's pretty wild. So it really is. So it kind of explains to me why that's been such a major issue in the space. Why every time MassDevice posts an article around ETO sterilization, we get a lot of page views because people are obviously following this. But you know, I feel like I'm asking you too many questions.
Yeah,
just
I was going to say,
that's issue. We got other people here, but
Logesh might be able to address some of the questions like alternative methods and how hard it is to get them approved.
Yeah, I mean, Logesh, do you have any insights? Or, I mean, I know you're coming here a lot to talk about MDR, but
Yes. So if you take some of the reusable devices, we do a lot of sterilization, but again the problem is like how clean it is and how are you going to really do the disinfection. That's again one of another challenge what you have seen in the industry as a common problem.
there's really like kind of like selecting, just really like figuring out your right method and knowing you're going to kind of be.
Yeah, and another problem what we have recently seen is about the removal of manufacturing materials. So some of the companies, they do a different manufacturing process. How do you really remove the cleaning fluids or even the detergent when you do the manufacturing process?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, so I guess kind of moving on to the MDR, I mean, that's been another really major issue in the industry. Everybody trying to meet the deadlines. I mean, how does that play into the sterilization space? I mean, if you're sterilizing devices over in Europe or I guess even selling devices over in Europe, maybe that were sterilized here. But I mean,
so if you take most of the orthopedic companies or any other medical device companies, what they do is they sometimes manufacture in-house and sometimes they outsource their products. And getting the information from the suppliers about their cleaning validation and again the disinfection issues, and they are not being very, very transparent. In few cases, the companies are very much reluctant to provide the details because some of them are their IP. And that's another common problem what we are seeing it. So in those cases, what we see is like we try to see like can we do the, again, one more set of sterilization validation or identify a new supplier. Again, moving to a new supplier and the turnaround time, what it takes to get this documentation up to date, it is going to take a lot of time. And also sometimes the cost involved in that process, it is going to be huge. So in few cases, like some of the companies, what they have decided is like to discontinue the product depending on the clinical study or what is the other expenses that is incurred due to this recent changes because of MDR.
right. I mean, as I recall, I mean, MDR isn't just about, new devices that you're bringing onto the market. I mean, you're having to go back and like prove data about devices that you've already had on the European market, right? And it sounds like that includes, revalidating your sterilization methods.
So another common problem what we are seeing is like currently if you see the current MDR regulations, no grandfathering is, you cannot reference to another old product that has been used by a competitor. So in those cases, what companies have decided is like try to check what is the post-market surveillance data that is available. And sometimes we also try to find out what is the clinical evidence what we have generated out of so many years. And we have seen very recently about a problem where the amount of money what it incurs for generating a clinical evidence is too much when you compare to the revenue. So basically the companies decide to discontinue the product in few cases.
Like this is just too much money to try to prove this. We're going to pull it off the European market.
Yes.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and also now if you see for the class 1R, the timeline what they gave recently was May 2020. But last 2 weeks before there was a corrigendum that passed, and now in that they said that the medical devices company can take still more time till May 2024. That's the kind of new timelines what the companies are coming out right now.
So there's a little bit of a little more wiggle room that they're allowing now.
Yes, and also might be for generating the clinical evidence, they might have some more time to even generate that.
But some of this, how much should you rely on, deadlines being extended? Because I kind of my understanding is some of this stuff would have to be passed by the European Parliament, which that's almost as hard as getting something passed in Congress. So
That's true.
It sounds like we're really facing a crunch time.
Yep. So MDR has given it's basically the companies have already released a product, And whatever they are spending their money, it is purely because of the documentation and also the changes to the regulations. So it's purely an kind of additional money that the company is actually trying to budget on their expenses.
Wow, that's kind of the lay of the land there. What you're facing with MDR. Well,
Yes.
So I mean, I guess moving on to I'd be interested in hearing from hearing from Erin here. I mean, tell us a little bit about what Verrix is planning to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Verax is currently developing technology for sterility assurance, and we're leveraging technology originally invented at NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs that was designed for sterility assurance, but for missions for space exploration, specifically for the Mars Explorer program. Why I bring that up specifically is we think it's really important that our hospital users have the most advanced technology. They're, as you mentioned at the top of the talk, they're performing really critical, important tasks in protecting patient safety. And what we've observed is the technology available on the hospital side in sterile processing departments isn't adequate, and specifically, there's a significant gap in innovation. When you look at the med device industry that we're all a part of, there's tremendous innovation, and I think that's why we're all here and participating in conferences like this. We see the potential of med device innovation. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the same investments in sterile processing. So that's an area of focus for Verrix. We're, as I mentioned, developing new sterility assurance technology, but we'd like to see greater participation from med device in solving some of these challenges that you see in hospitals.
Sterilization assurance, how does that work with your technology?
So sterility assurance, it's the monitoring process to ensure that sterilization and the cleaning processes as well. There's advanced monitoring technology for cleaning and sterilization these days, but really ensuring that that's all occurring properly. I think we've all seen the headline news. Unfortunately, there was a news story just a couple of weeks ago coming out of Indiana where 1,000 patients were notified that they were potentially impacted by improper device sterilization. And when we see these stories occurring again and again, we have to ask ourselves, how can we do better? Unfortunately, we see a lot of those stories and analyze that something went wrong at the technician end of the spectrum. But I'd like to challenge us and say, if you're seeing this happen again and again, where technicians are not able to reliably, repeatedly reprocess these devices, perhaps it's not the technician or the process. There's something that's got to be done on the device side.
Yeah, well, I mean, a good example I can think of right now is that, there've just been all these problems with duodenoscopes over recent years, and it's come to the point now that we're getting, now finally FDA is approving. I think it was a duodenoscope from Pentax, where the solution is that they pop the top on it, and it's it's a single use tip on it. So that's instead of like having, I remember FDA releasing detailed cleaning instructions for this elevator mechanism that was causing so many problems and even superbug outbreaks. Now we're just gonna pop the top on it, and that's so new designs coming out, which that kind of like goes to Jen really well here. You're working on new endoscope. Tell everybody about that.
Sure. So myself, I really came from a technology background into medical devices. In the past, I worked at Intuitive Surgical. The Oxide laparoscope is my work, or partially my work, and also later on at Oris, I was second employee working on the Monarch system for the first 4 years there. So really, from the technology side, we see a couple of trends. One is we see technology getting more focused on getting things smaller, getting things more easy to be integrated, so that we can then treat patient earlier. What that means is when you look at the surgery, it used to be cutting people open. Now into the surgical, like small incisions with what we do for endoscopy or endoscopes, we try to go into the body, so without making a lot of blood and body liquid contact. What that causes on the medical community is people generally think, oh, that's not it's not very easy to get contaminated because you are not getting a lot of blood contacts. So therefore, there's something called a high-level disinfection currently being, at the hospital as a protocol for people to clean or they say disinfect endoscopes. And that's where I think the root cause of, the problem is for getting these cross-patient contamination and infections and, even death. And on the other hand, as technologists, we look at what's out there, another field we can put into medical devices. As we all know, medical devices is slower and also lagging behind the technology curve compared to IT or even automobile in some ways. So we look at all other technologies. We say, wow, there's so many good technologies out there on the like consumer electronics, on robotics or other things we can take over and put into newer generation of devices, whether that's an endoscope or some other cool devices you're working on.
It's possible that it then makes it more affordable because you're using some of this like more miniaturized consumer tech, and then we can get to single use. That's how you solve the reprocessing challenges.
That's right. I mean, like at the end of the day, hospitals and us both have to look at the cost of switching costs, including what's their reprocessing cost of endoscopes, what's their maintenance cost, what's the risk factor of infections. So putting all that together, then you show that evidence to the hospital users. They're going to eventually be justified by saying, oh, now it is time to switch over to single use. Although superficially single use look high in price per unit, but if you look this whole math and systematically, it boils down to a number that's surprising to a lot of our customers. So I think that's a very easy switch when they saw the math and figure out what are risk factors behind the scene.
I mean, tell me a little bit more about. It sounds. I could see that. Like when you first glance, you're saying like, oh, they're throwing away endoscopes all the time. But it sounds like. Tell me a little bit more about putting that economic argument together. That no, yes, you're throwing away our endoscopes all the time, but this is actually saving you money in the long run.
That's right. So specifically, we mentioned duodenoscope, for example. If we look at a Olympus duodenoscope or any other major brand duodenoscopes, there is a tower that's capital sale, and also there's the endoscope or duodenoscope that's also capital sale. So generally speaking, they amortize those over 5 to 7 years, and then you basically, depending on how many procedures you do, you can calculate per procedure how much you are amortizing over time. And there's also the reprocessing, meaning there's a cleaning, there's a high-level disinfection, there's a storage. And then there's also putting things together prior to the procedure and post-procedure, and also the labor cost and all the chemicals and any other accessory like trays or packaging, whatever that is. So adding all this together, magically there's like a number in a few $100s depending on what scope it is. And therefore, when we come up with a single-use solution as an alternative, we add that all up and label and say, well, here's the risk of infection. You got a lawsuit in 5 years, for example, 1 out of 1,000 patients, that's like $5 million. You do that math, but saying hey, that's less likely, but it's still possibly there. But then, significant part will be the reprocessing cost and labor cost. That's for sure be there.
Yeah.
And then you say, here's our price. It's very attractive and very competitive, and they get it. So that's the math we normally do with our customers.
Sounds like too, even like I can imagine you could make arguments over like reduced complications and rehospitalizations or whatever. Maybe it isn't at the level where somebody's going to sue, but you do have somebody laid up in the hospital.
I do want to add to that, though. It's not only just infection to switch over to single use. There's also the convenience of doing single use, right? It's every time when you open a new iPhone, you're like, wow, this is new. It's exciting. There's no defection or maintenance issues. There's no breakage or anything. And also, just when you're done, you throw that away. You saved a lot of hassle of bothering all the storage and handling, and it's there when you need it. Yeah. Like in ICU, for example, a lot of the take-up on bronchoscopy, single-use endoscopes are in the ICU where they need a scope now and they can't wait for the turnaround for the reusable scopes.
So you just rip open a bag and off you go.
Right. There's more to it, but the most important one is patient clinical value of infection reduction. I think that's always stays on top of others.
Yeah. Just to echo what he's saying, like one is about the disinfection, and if you see a lot of orthopedic companies, what they're trying to do is they're trying to go towards single-use devices so that we do not have this kind of issues related to disinfection. That's another trend what I'm seeing it very recently.
So you mean in the ortho space, they're moving toward single use?
To more towards of single use.
See, Erin was ready to say something. Yeah.
Well, I would say if there's any positive aspect about some of the crises we've had in infection outbreak and hospital-acquired infection, it's that there's more of an appetite to look at the equation differently, and I think that's what Jian's speaking to. There's a need and an appetite to solve this problem in a different way. So it's resulted in innovation in a space that for a long time had very stagnant innovation.
I'm almost thinking for the people out here, I mean, this is kind of an opportunity. Like if you can find a device that's, but had to be reprocessed constantly, you could find some of the, cool consumer electronic tech they've got around here and apply it to it so you get a single-use device. So, I mean, it sounds like that's actually a really neat area for innovation and opportunity if anybody's looking for a new project here. So, well,
one of the things I'd like to mention is, as Jan and Erin had said, is most of the hospital reprocessing is what they call high-level disinfection. And what that means is there's a 1 in 1,000 probability of getting an infection or death. It's how sterile is the product, basically. I anticipate in the next couple of years, the FDA is going to mandate that hospitals use sterile endoscopes, whether they sterilize them in the building or whether they use sterile disposable. The day is coming because the FDA will say, we can't afford the risk of high-level disinfection. We've got to go to the next level, which is a 1 in a million probability of death and infection.
Yeah.
So the market will be going that way. The problem is in the hospital is they don't have the equipment to sterilize reusable medical devices to the sterilization required level. So that's where the real challenge is.
So I do want to add to that. It's also technology limiting from the availability of these devices to be, steamed, right, or the autoclaved. Because at first, when I worked at Intuitive, it was like a rigid, robotic laparoscope that for sure in autoclave. But later on, when we try to look at flexible devices go into the body, newer technology cause polymers become possible to do those procedures. Suddenly, your device is no longer autoclavable. So that's where technology is also pushing things to be smaller and flexible and go into the body with the smaller incisions. That, by definition, is most likely not autoclavable. But EO, I guess I'm not aware of any hospital has EO facility. Currently they're running sterilization. So autoclave is the default configuration or choice.
So really, if you're using like these really flexible polymer parts, I mean, single use is, you're really heading towards single use then. Just a little more from Erin about, the technology that you're offering. So this would be validating in the healthcare setting. So this really wouldn't be a medical device company saying like, oh, our sterilization worked. This is like in the healthcare setting, trying to reprocess and saying, did we sterilize this?
Right.
Or did we disinfect it enough?
Right. So the product is for the verification of the sterilization process. So every time you have a procedure, you use one of your innovative surgical devices. Obviously, after that procedure, it's going to go through a reprocessing and sterilization process. And then you want to monitor and ensure that that was done correctly, done proficiently. But one of the most important aspects of that is that you're reprocessing your instruments the exact same way every single time for each and every patient. That's part of the standard of care, is validating that every patient receives not just the same surgery in the OR, but the same quality of instrumentation. Was it working correctly? Was it free from contamination? That's all part of the standard of care and ensuring that each and every patient receives that high standard of care. There's been a lot of advancement in monitoring in the past 5 years or so as more and more of these crises around hospital-acquired infections have come to light. So that's not just for the sterilization process, but there's novel technologies in cleaning, in testing some of those earlier processes. It's all critical, but I would say there's still a lot of work to be done in that area.
How much are we seeing the regulators like FDA actually adding that, saying like, okay, like before we approve or clear a medical device, you need to include, like validation in your disinfection instructions?
The FDA has actually made some important strides here. So they're moving towards more standardization. That's one of the key challenges the user in the hospital, the sterile processing technician, faces. They're tasked with complying with certain standards and guidelines, the manufacturer's instructions for use, the FDA's expectations. The challenge is the FDA's guidance, the AAMI guidelines, and the manufacturer's IFU don't always align. It's been very complex for the sterile processing technician. FDA is doing some important work in driving that standardization, but there's a catch-up process. So now FDA is moving much more towards standardization of what sterilization cycle you use. For example, that's good news for your end user because it's going to ultimately end up in fewer mistakes when they're trying to manage this complexity. But there's a catch-up game between the devices that have been approved, in the past 15 years versus new devices that are coming to market.
What I'm just interested here, like what innovation is Verax bringing to bear here? Versus what's already there.
So we're focused. To speak carefully here, but we're focused on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You might not be able to tell too much, but yeah.
We're focused on ensuring a high degree of accuracy and speed. Speed is really critical to these users who are trying to turn over the instrument devices multiple times a day to keep up with the high demand of the surgical caseload. So if you ask anyone in a hospital environment, they're going to tell you speed is a critical concern, but we can't have speed at the expense of accuracy or quality and outcomes. So we're paying attention to both of those things, as well as the user experience. The technology for monitoring sterilization that's currently available in the hospital was designed decades ago. And there's several usability factors that just haven't been taken into consideration or evolved in the past several decades. And I love that Sean's mentioning consumer tech and the little devices we carry around in our pockets all day long. That's the expectation in med device as well, is that we have very user-friendly devices these days. We have the luxury as a company that's bringing a new platform to market to really look at things from the ground up. So we're looking at every aspect of the user experience and making sure this is as seamless as possible to both improve the experience, but really to reduce errors, to reduce injury to users and risk to patient.
That sounds good. Well, we still have a few minutes here. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Can you talk some more about what those user experience gaps are you see?
Specific in the monitoring space, there's a manual activation process today. Without getting into too much detail, there's a multi-step manual activation of these monitoring tests that you perform on each and every sterilization cycle. That's up to 25 cycles per day in a busy hospital. And there's several parts of that manual process where you can have a user error, and there's a couple components with today's technology where you can have a user injury. And that's all well documented and well known that you have these gaps. These tests are processed in a reader machine, essentially. We've identified that machine can do this activation process. So that's the transition that we're looking to deliver to our end users.
Any other questions?
Denny, your insights on the EO has been very valuable. The size of your business compared to the one of Stericycle, and you mentioned there's politics, is some of it just the volume, or is it, you said that new equipment can actually clean. Is the answer lots of small plants versus very large ones, or is it strictly just technology on the EO side, ETO?
A lot of the facilities that use ethylene oxide are many years old, and I think what we need to do is upgrade our facilities that are currently doing contract ETO, improve the product flow, improve the product handling using automated equipment. The scrubber systems are there to get rid of ethylene oxide. The technology exists, but the facilities themselves are not up to the place where I think they should personally be. We have to do everything we can. That's the FDA mandate. The EPA mandate is we minimize the amount of ethylene oxide we use. We reduce the amount of EO exposure. And on the back end, we get as much ethylene oxide out of the product as we can before we give it to any patient for patient use.
So why is that not happening? Why are you not upgrading the plant? Is that a cost issue? Like, are you expect to?
It sounds like you are.
Well, there's a number of new facilities being built with ethylene oxide. I helped design a facility in Irvine last year. I helped design one in Colorado. Cosmed's building a facility in the Dominican Republic has 8 30-pallet sterilizers. And it's going to be a state-of-the-art facility, and they've already filled 4 of the sterilizers. I expect they'll fill the other 4 in the next 2 years. As soon as these sterilizer facilities come on board, especially the new modern ones, they get filled up. There's so much growth going on in the industry right now.
I just want to add to that question. As a startup, we look for solutions on the market, but surprisingly, when we hire very experienced people who've done this before, they always tell me, Jian, there's only 3 companies in the US that can do that for you. I'm like, wait a minute, what's wrong here? There's a big gap from the customer's needs and also availability of these services. I actually don't know why, but I think that's a great opportunity to do a lot more, or even portable. So I don't know what that is, but I think there's a huge gap from what's needed by the market and what's available today.
That's the change we need.
So you had a question?
Just outside the U.S. on sterilization, are you seeing a similar trend of what FDA and EPA are looking to have in place?
Europe particularly does not like ethylene oxide sterilization. They're looking for alternatives. They prefer radiation. Asia, ethylene oxide is the most cost-effective method of sterilization, so that tends to be dominant in the Asian countries. In my work, I travel all over the world. I've been to almost every EO facility, most of the cobalt facilities in the world. So I get to keep track of what's going on out there. And yeah, ethylene oxide is growing in Asia. Europe, it's holding its own, but I mean, it's going to have to improve the technology if they're going to continue to stay in business.
Gosh, any other? Yeah.
So, John, you mentioned about the cost comparison between reuse and single use, and you mentioned about the litigation, like what that would happen like once in 5 years or something like that. But wouldn't the insurance possibly be covered with insurance, which take care of the litigation? So can you include that cost into this calculation?
I think that's what you just mentioned there is a lot of hospital administrators like opinion. They're like, it's not an issue until it's an issue. And with every I mean, that's my feeling. Like, when I talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, we understand this, and they don't feel nervous until there's like actual patient cross-contamination cases. Like what?
They already be covering that through insurance. Wouldn't they have insurance to mitigate that?
I think if you purely look at financials, there may be. I haven't looked into the insurance by myself, but there's more than the things that's like hospital has an intrinsic operation cost. So that portion of the operation cost can be offloaded or offset by offloading the crew to take care of the patients more, so that we can offer technologies that over time single use is going to be even cheaper and cheaper. So that's what I believe the opportunity is going to be in general.
And when you say insurance, are you talking about the reimbursement for the procedure or the hospital's
Liability
protection? Liability.
Yeah. Yeah, though I imagine, like, too, if you start getting sued left and right, your premiums are going to go up. So you'd think they'd probably want to avoid getting sued. That'd be a good thing. Gosh, do we have any other questions? Well, I guess to wrap up, I mean, as I said at the beginning, sterilization, I mean, it's a serious issue, and just because we have your expertise here, I mean, just really quick, I mean, what keeps you up at night in this space? What do you think is the biggest thing we've got to watch out for going forward?
Have we not covered enough to scare you?
I know we are doing a lot of scares here.
Honestly, I'd like to flip your question a little bit. And we had a good discussion yesterday about human factors design, and that's my challenge to everyone in the room, is just to think about these challenges around sterility early and really make it a priority in your device design, in your testing, and understand how it's ultimately impacting not just your development of the device, but the end user. And that end user includes the reprocessing technicians. They're ultimately going to have to maintain these devices. So if we could just keep them in the forefront in the device, I think will improve the outcomes for patients ultimately.
Great. Logesh.
So one thing what's going on in the EMDR is more about the documentation to meet the regulations, right? So now currently what you see is like for biocompatibility and the sterilization and manufacturing process flow information. These are the three important areas where the documentation has become very, very necessary, and European EU EMDR talks very strictly about it. Without this information, you may not be even able to get the certificates. Those are the important three things what I would really recommend.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from a device company perspective, I think I don't think we do innovation for the matter of innovation. Really, if even single-use endoscope still has to be sterilized, still have to be EO'd at the very beginning before use. I think the opportunity here again is if there's a way to lower the cost of reprocessing or specifically sterilization, either that or newer technology to enable sterilizing newer generation of materials or device and things like that. I think that's also a very nice solution. Single use is one alternative to that, but it's not the only solution. So I'm just hoping there's more effort in reducing the cost of sterilization and also making it more readily available in the hospitals and other settings.
Yes, I agree. I think that the thing that we need to do is reduce patient risk. I think it all comes down to that. I think we also have to reduce the liability. I mean, UCLA here 2 years ago, they killed 7 people. I mean, no, those are real people. I mean, we've got to eliminate that as a possibility. So I think we can do it. We just have to work diligently to get there.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody. This was a great discussion. Hopefully, we didn't scare everybody too much, but it's an important issue. So, thanks a lot. And hey, Thomas, what's next on the agenda?
We have a break, then followed by lunch. So we'll
Sounds good.
Back at 1:45 for
1:45.
block for the healthcare system.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you.